Hello. Hello, good morning. I'm Shannon Chambers, the Labor Commissioner. We'll get started because I know in the interest of time, it's better to start on time and try and get everybody out of here about 11:15. Just so everybody knows, we'll have done 9 of these just this week on public works and prevailing wage. And one of the reasons for that is there was quite a few changes that came out of this legislative session. Some of them are not really new changes, they're just bringing back the old law and different things like that, but obviously wanted to get the word out to contractors, awarding bodies, anybody else that's involved in public works and prevailing wage. The one thing I want to say up front is, everybody just stay calm. I realize some of this stuff, you may not like it, and when we did a training on Wednesday, there was a couple people that said, well, can't I protest this now, or can't I fight this? Well, the time for that is kind of over. The legislative session is done. Now, that's not to say that, some of these issues may require some further legal analysis down the road, new regulations, different things like that. But in terms of the changes that came out, it is the law now, and that's that. So, you can complain all you want, but our job is to now educate you and try and enforce those new laws, and for all of us to work forward and try and do the best that we can. So I also have with me David Gould, who's our senior investigator up in Northern Nevada, and Jennifer Jenkins, who's an auditor investigator up in Northern Nevada. And we're going to kind of trade off a little bit with the presentation just because I've done 9 of these this week and my voice kind of goes in and out. But I'll kind of just start and just kind of give you a big overview of kind of our office, and then I'll highlight the big legislative changes, and then we'll kind of get into what our office does and in terms of public works and prevailing wage. So, Office of the Labor Commissioner, we're a very, very small office in terms of state departments, 19 total people, 8 investigators for the entire state. So that includes public works and prevailing wage. That also includes the other side, which is minimum wage and overtime and employment practices. We also license private employment agencies. So we are extremely small. We are a general fund agency, which means we do not generate revenue, we don't collect fees. Any fines that we impose, forfeitures, we do not get to keep them. So for those of you out there that think, oh, the Labor Commissioner is just imposing fines because they use it to fund their agency, that is absolutely false. We don't get to keep any of those fines. So again, small agency with a lot of responsibility, and we try and do the best we can and try and be as efficient as possible, but there are certain things where we just don't have the resources and the capacity to hit, but again, try and do the best that we can. So that's kind of a big overview. I'm not going to go through each and every single one of these sections. The section we're really here to talk about today is Nevada Revised Statute Section 338, which is public works and prevailing wage. So jumping right into that, let's jump right into the deep end of the pool. So a public work project is essentially any type of a project for the construction, alteration, and repair that is funded with public money. So your schools, your roads, your libraries, we pretty much know what a public work is based on where the funding comes from. If it's public money, it's a public work. Now, the big change that happened during this legislative session is the public work project amount went back to $100,000. Some people like that, some people don't like that at all. It went back to $100,000 effective July 1st, 2019. So, if there is a project that is not awarded prior to July 1st, 2019, if it is over $100,000, you are now subject to prevailing wage. And I'm making that point very, very clear because in the 9 sessions that we've done this week, there are awarding bodies that are still advising contractors that the $250,000 amount still applies. It does not apply. It's over. July 1st, 2019. So unless it was awarded prior to that date, the $100,000 amount now applies. And I'm sure there's some of you out there that, I'm sure there's projects that are out to bid, or maybe the bids have been turned in, but it's technically not awarded. you're in what I call one of those gray areas where, in my opinion, based on that July 1st, 2019 effective date, if it's over 100,000, you're going to have to pay prevailing wage. Now again, you know, we can advise you of the law. We can't tell you how to run your business or run your organization, but that's my best advice at this point. My other piece of advice is that if you have a project, and we got into this when we had the project's $250,000. Well, we have a project that we think is going to be $80,000 or $85,000 or $90,000. Should we bid it as a public works project or prevailing wage? Again, my advice is if it's about $85,000, $90,000, you're probably better off bidding it as a public work and a prevailing wage project, because any change order, and given the times we live in and the cost of materials and different things like that, that could put you over that 100,000 very, very quickly. And once it goes over 100, you're going to have to go back and pay prevailing wage. So again, that's technically not the law. That's just a piece of advice that our office is communicating to everybody out there that, you know, unfortunately we've seen too many situations where people, you know, it'll be like 1,000, 2,000 away from the public work project amount and they don't bid it as a public work, and one change order and you're over the amount. So again, if you have individual projects and questions on that, you can contact us offline and we'll be more than happy to answer that. But you know, we ran into that again with the 250. Well, it's 240, it's 245. Again, use your best judgment, but if you're close, I would just do it as a public work project and pay prevailing wage. So a couple exceptions to the $100,000 amount is normal maintenance. This is an issue that's been around for 10, 12 years. In January of 2019, the Nevada Supreme Court issued a decision in a case called Bombardier, which dealt with normal maintenance and what is normal maintenance. It involved a project at the Las Vegas airport and the tram that goes back and forth that takes you to your gates or your luggage and different things like that. That opinion is on our website, but basically what it says is that if you're going to do any type of repair, alteration, construction, and it's over whatever the public work project amount is, which is now 100, it's subject to prevailing wage. If it's janitorial, if it's like your landscaping, your day-to-day true maintenance type stuff, it probably meets the exemption for normal maintenance. But again, we have seen that abused. Unfortunately, we've seen projects that are $5 million, $10 million where an awarding body will say it's normal maintenance, and they're clearly doing construction, they're clearly doing repair. So we've advised the awarding bodies that it really needs to be like janitorial, again, day-to-day maintenance type things, not big construction projects. Another one in there is an emergency, and again, using this as an example and one that I didn't want to use, but at our training on Monday, somebody from the University of Nevada, Reno approached me and said, obviously with the explosion up there, does that qualify as an emergency? Yes, it does, quite obviously. You know, it's things like that, fires, floods, different things like that, those obviously qualify as an emergency. I will tell you that we've had awarding bodies approach us, well, we don't like the building we're in, or we don't like the paint color, and the employees aren't happy. Is that an emergency? That's not an emergency. It's got to be something legitimately related to safety and health and those types of things. So first step in the process is obtaining a Public Works project number. You can do that online through our website. We typically turn those around within 48 hours. Again, if you have a special request, you can always contact myself or contact my staff. We will turn those around quickly, but please don't make everything an emergency, and this is mainly for the awarding bodies. Try and get your requests in, you know, within probably a week or two before you're going to bid the project, because it just makes it easier for everybody. One of the things in the previous slides too, and it may not impact a whole lot of people in this room, but the bill that also lowered the amount back down to 100,000, it now also subjects charter schools to prevailing wage requirements. That was Assembly Bill 136. Again, I don't know how many of you in this room do charter school construction, but they are now subject to prevailing wage as well. So just to kind of give you a perspective, so when you work for the state, you talk about fiscal years, so that's what FY is. A fiscal year is July 1st to June 30th of any given year. So in 2018, we had 646 public works project number requests. With the amount going back to 100,000 now, my guess is when we do this again next year, we'll probably be up to 3,000, 3,500, maybe even higher. Just a show of hands, some of our trainings of, how many projects do you have out there right now that are over 100? I mean, some people said hundreds, some people said potentially thousands. So that number is going to jump, and again, that's going to be the responsibility of the awarding body to get those numbers, but also to monitor all those new projects. Obviously, the labor commissioner plays a role in, ensuring that the awarding bodies and the contractors are complying with the law. But that first level of monitoring is with the awarding body. So I can't emphasize that enough, that if you're an awarding body sitting here today, that you probably need to do some reviews of how you're monitoring your projects, because if that number doubles, triples, et cetera, that's that many more certified payroll reports, that's that many more things that need to be checked off. So again, be aware that you're probably going to have to maybe hire more staff or look at additional resources, because you're probably now going to double or triple the amount of projects that you're now responsible for. So this is kind of a diagram of a typical public works project. And I will tell you that 90% of them go off just fine. You request the number, it's not normal maintenance, it doesn't have any other exemption, it's over 100,000. You award the project, you start working on the project, submit your certified payroll reports. The certified payroll reports are fine, project's done, it's complete, it's over. Everybody's happy. Again, that's the normal situation. Unfortunately, about 10% of these projects do not go off without problems, and we'll start getting into some of the reasons why there are problems and why the labor commissioner has to take action and why the labor commissioner has to issue administrative penalties and fines. But I want to tell you that the majority of projects do go off just fine. So your general responsibilities for your awarding bodies is obviously you have to request your public works project number. Number two, I'll get into a little bit later. This is going to be a new requirement starting January 1st, 2020. It's Senate Bill 207. It's called the Apprenticeship Utilization Act. Again, I'll talk about that a little bit later. Obviously, you have to notify us if the project's been delayed or canceled. You bid the project. You bid it at the appropriate prevailing wage rates. You award the project. Obviously monitor the project, and then if there's investigations or different things like that, obviously the awarding body is responsible for, on some level, conducting the initial investigation. So your general responsibilities of the contractors. The first one, I can't emphasize enough how important that one is. And one of the reasons for that is when we get a claim or somebody comes in and says, hey, I'm not being paid correctly, the first thing we do is say, what's the project, who's the contractor, who's the subcontractor? Unfortunately, we've had so many cases where the general or prime contractor is not sending us a list of the subcontractors. So by the time we get out there and start the investigation, there are times when that subcontractor may already be gone. So there's nobody to collect from except the general and the prime contractor. It is a requirement by law to have that list to us in 10 days, and I'm sure there's some of you in this room that have received the letter that says if you don't get this to us now, it's a $5,000 administrative penalty. And I'm telling you here today, we're not joking. Unfortunately, this creates issues not only from the wage claim side, but the workers' comp side, from just project monitoring, all different kinds of sides. So if you're a general sitting in here today or a prime contractor, those lists need to be to us in 10 days. And obviously now with probably the increase in projects, those lists are probably going to double and triple as well, but those do need to be submitted within 10 days by law. So prevailing wage, again, prevailing wage is one of those topics where people either like prevailing wage or they don't like prevailing wage. You will also hear people say, well, I like prevailing wage, I just don't like the way it's calculated. This legislative session, the legislature decided, okay, we're still going to have prevailing wage, but we're going to change it a little bit. So Senate Bill 243 basically says now we're going to have 4 regions within the state. We're going to have Washoe County, which is an urban region in the north. We're going to have Clark County, which is an urban region in the south. The rest of the northern counties will be the northern, quote-unquote, rural counties. The rest of the southern counties will be southern rural. So it doesn't necessarily change the way we do the survey. It's just going to change how the rates are going to look when they're published in October. One of the issues involved with this whole bill is that a lot of the people from, quote-unquote, the rural counties don't like the way that the, quote-unquote, urban rates affect the rural counties. So this bill and kind of the intent of this bill is to get more of a balanced approach to the rates and to have them better reflect the rural, quote-unquote, rural counties. Honestly, and I'm saying this and said it during the session, I don't anticipate that this is going to change much, at least this survey process time. Maybe 2 years from now it'll change, but I really don't see this changing much this time. One of the other things that Senate Bill 243 did is instead of doing a survey every year, we will now do the survey every odd number year. So we are doing the survey right now, and for those of you out there who have not submitted your surveys or who say, oh, you know, it's just going to be a union rate anyway and I'm not going to submit my survey, I cannot emphasize to you enough, please get your surveys in, because technically what we calculate coming out of this survey process will be the rates for the next 2 years. So please get those surveys in. Again, there's some little adjustments to those rates once they're established over the next 2 years. If it's a non-union rate that prevails, it'll increase by the consumer price index. If it's a union rate that prevails, we will have to make adjustments to that rate based on the collective bargaining agreement. But again, what we calculate coming out of this 2019 survey process will technically be the rates for the next 2 years. So I cannot emphasize how important it is to get your surveys in, and they're due Monday, next Monday, July 15th. Now, obviously, we're pretty flexible. For those of you that have worked with our office, we're pretty flexible. But it can't just be, oh, my dog ate all my surveys, or oh, I forgot. You need to at least say, hey, you know, we forgot to get the surveys in because we had a fire or we had a death in the family, something good. Unfortunately, we don't like to have people running into our office, you know, 30 days after the surveys are due and say, oh, here's, you know, 100 surveys that we didn't turn in. Unfortunately, it creates sometimes potential delays when we publish the rates, so please get those surveys in by Monday if you can. The 90% school rate, for those of you that know that rate, the school construction rate, also as a result of AB 136, that rate is now gone, effective July 1st, 2019. So again, for the awarding bodies, the school districts, if you awarded a project prior to July 1st, 2019 and used that 90% rate, you're okay. After July 1st, 2019, there is no such thing as that 90% rate. It's gone. Again, charter schools now subject to prevailing wage. Again, how that looks, we don't even know. We don't know how many charter schools are being built. We know in Las Vegas what typically happens is they'll rent a space and then do tenant improvements. But again, how our office regulates that, we'll have to find out because it's brand new to us. So your information, obviously, that goes into the calculation of the prevailing wage, it really hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot. We use, obviously, the survey, collective bargaining agreements, we'll look at the federal rates. One of the things that is new this time, and it's one of those areas where we're still trying to feel our way out and how this is going to look, is as a result of Assembly Bill 190, zone rates and what are called premium pay rates are now part of this whole world and now part of potentially the prevailing wage calculation. Where this gets a little gray and murky is Assembly Bill 190 became effective July 1st, 2019. Now, do those premium pay rates now apply to the existing prevailing wage rates, or are they only going to apply going forward? Our office has kind of said we think it's going to apply going forward because we're kind of in this gray area right now where we have the existing rates and we're going to be publishing new ones in October. But what I would tell you is if you're working on a project and the prevailing wage rate is a union rate, you do need to be aware of those premium pay requirements. And it's typically like working on a holiday or working like graveyard shifts or different things like that. My advice, and again, I don't tell people how to run their projects, I don't tell people how to schedule their crews, but just be aware of that, and if you can avoid those situations, then obviously try and do that. Again, we also know that, especially like road projects, you don't want to shut I-80 down on a Friday afternoon. So we also realize that there might be times where people have to work Saturday, Sunday, holidays. But just know that that premium pay is now in play. And not to say that it wasn't before, especially if it's a union contractor, but where this is really going to hit now is if you're a non-union contractor and the prevailing wage rate is a union rate, that the way the law reads is you are now subject to those premium pay requirements. Now, that could have some potential legal challenges down the road. We don't know, but again, we're just letting you know that this is now the law. Zone rates are still the law. Again, some people like zone rates, some people can't stand zone rates. During the testimony during the legislature, a lot of the rural counties were like, we don't understand zone rates, we don't like them. Again, they still apply and they're still part of prevailing wage. So if you have individual questions on both of those, again, please contact our office because it is the law now, and whether anybody likes it or not, it is the law. So currently there's 42 job classifications that we survey for. The Labor Commissioner does not have the authority to change any of those without going through the regulatory process, which means any job classification, even the job descriptions themselves, in order to change those, it has to be a whole public process. For those of you that have been around this world a long time, one of the previous labor commissioners tried to get rid of the soil tester job classification and job description. That resulted in a lawsuit that basically was in the courts for like 10 years, and finally the Nevada Supreme Court said, yes, Labor Commissioner, you can change any of those, but you have to go through the public process, which on some level makes sense because the more input we have from contractors and people that do the work, the better the quality of the job classifications and descriptions. So again, we're going to be doing regions now, Washoe, Clark, Northern, Southern, and again, how that looks, we don't know because it's brand new. Never done it before. Again, I don't think it's going to have a drastic change, at least this cycle, but potentially 2 years from now, it may have some changes. I mentioned it earlier, Assembly Bill 190, if the prevailing wage rate is a union rate, which we publish on our website, anytime that collective bargaining agreement is renegotiated, the Labor Commissioner is now going to have to recognize those adjustments to the collective bargaining agreement. The question that comes up is, okay, we've already bid a project, we've already started the project, a new collective bargaining agreement came in, technically now the rates are higher or maybe the rates are lower. Our position at this point is similar to some of the other bills. If that project's already been awarded and it's started, those rates would not go back, they would only go forward. Now that is our position and that's how we interpret the bill. There is potential that there might be individuals and groups out there that don't interpret it that way, that interpret it that any adjustment should go back instead of just going forward, but that's the position our office is taking, that we will certainly recognize those adjustments, but we will recognize them going forward and not going back. Again, we'll have to see how that looks because we haven't really been doing that because it hasn't been the law. So how that impacts projects and changes rates and different things like that, we're going to have to see because it's new. And again, we're going to try and implement and interpret it the best we can, but this could be one that causes some potential issues as well. So once we publish the rates, we can correct them if it's, a clerical mistake, different things like that. There's also the opportunity for a public body and really anybody to object to the rates. That's a 30-day period, so once they're published, you have 30 days to object to them. I will tell you that that is extremely important, and especially now with all the new requirements. When those rates come out, and we typically publish them like the second week of September so that everybody gets a look. They officially publish October 1st. Then you have a whole other 30 days to look at them and object to them. But after that 30 days, by law, if there's no objection, they are the prevailing wage rates. We had a situation up in Northern Nevada about 3 years ago where the truck driver rate was published, and it turned out it was about $30 higher than it was the previous year, and received a panic call from some people and said, how did this happen? What went on? Well, we found out that there was no survey submitted in Northern Nevada. So the way technically the law works is if there's no survey submitted in a county, then you will pull from the next closest county. Well, in this case, the next closest county was Clark County. So again, look at those rates. If something looks off, and we literally, we have people who call us and say, it's 2 cents off or it's 3 cents off. That is fine. We need to know and we need to fix it. But please, especially this time, look at those rates because again, these are going to be there for the next couple years. And like I said, we're very reasonable in terms of trying to fix things and adjust things, but the law is basically the law. You have 30 days and that's it. So please pay attention this time. You'll also see, again, if it's a union rate, you'll see like you do now, you'll see the zone rates. And we're also going to have a line that'll say premium pay. See the collective bargaining agreement for those requirements. But it'll look pretty much the same, but just a couple little differences based on changes in the law. Again, the survey, it is what it is, and I'm just going to say it that way. People have talked about, well, can't we do it differently? Should we do it, based on the federal rates? Can't we use the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation numbers? Every session, since I've been Labor Commissioner, there's been discussion about the survey and how it should be done. We're still doing a survey, and that's it. So again, whether you like it or don't like it, that's the law. It didn't change. The changes we're making is, again, just the regions instead of by each individual county. But the survey is still the way that we will calculate the prevailing wage. So Assembly Bill 90, I mentioned it before. This talks about the zone pay and the premium pay, and that those now are part of the prevailing wage. Where I think the premium pay will really have an impact is not this survey cycle, but probably next survey cycle, because obviously that premium pay will now be reported and it'll now be surveyed for. So again, be aware of that issue, and certainly if it's a union rate, make sure you look at the collective bargaining agreement for when that premium pay will apply. But it is It is now the law. This is another big one. Projects over 36 months. This was again Assembly Bill 190. So if you have a project that's going to go over 36 months, you really need to go and look at Assembly Bill 190 and the provisions and make the required adjustments that you need to make. The testimony that was provided on this particular bill was that there were projects that had gone on 4 or 5 years, and essentially that rate was frozen. So what this bill is trying to address is to say, hey, if you know you're going to have a project that's going to go over 3 years, there's going to have to be some adjustment to those wage rates. Again, not going to tell you how to monitor your projects, but definitely be aware of this one, because this is one where I have a feeling that there will be people watching some of these bigger projects, and they will be watching to make sure that once that 36 months kicks in, that those rates are adjusted. Again, make sure you track your projects good. Make sure you have some type of a reminder system or something when you're coming up on that 36 months. I wouldn't wait until month 35. I would try and fix it and be ready for it right before then. So who's required to be paid prevailing wage? So basically it's anybody who's employed at the site of the public work, who's necessary for performing that work and is at the site of the public work. And I'm simplifying, but I'm not going to go through word by word. Where this gets tricky is, and we've issued an advisory opinion on this, is where you have companies or individuals that provide quote-unquote services. So think of like your Sandy Hut driver, your water delivery person, somebody that's just really there providing a service. They're not actually there doing construction. They're not doing the repair. They're maybe on the site 10, 20 minutes and then off the site. There was a bill this session, it did not pass, Senate Bill 340, that was going to try and subject certain deliveries to prevailing wage. Again, that did not pass this session, but this is one of those issues where probably every session we'll have a discussion about it and who really is quote unquote necessary to the construction or necessary to the public work. But our office basically takes the position that if it's truly a service, we're not going to expand prevailing wage outside of the box of construction, repair, and alteration. But again, be aware of that issue where we do get complaints, and I might have Dave speak to this. Where we get complaints is they're performing a service, but they might be out there 4, 5, 6 hours. That gets a little bit trickier for us, because if it's really just a service, why are they out there that long? And what are they actually doing, unfortunately? So again, just be aware of that issue. And if you have a water truck out there or something like that that's out there more than 2, 3, 4 hours, that could end up in a complaint with our office, because are they really just doing a service at that point? Where this comes up to is with cement trucks. We have cement trucks that drive on a project, they drop the cement, they drive off. Sometimes that takes 20 minutes, sometimes that takes an hour. Then we'll get the complaint where the cement truck drove to the same project the entire day. So now is that subject to prevailing wage? Again, these are case-by-case analysis that we do, and each situation is different. But just be aware of those issues, and again, monitor your projects and track who's coming on and off the project. Go ahead.
I just have a quick question. Has anything changed with like owner-operators for companies with the prevailing wage? Because there was an advisory or a determination that, if they pay themselves a distribution or a salary, that they don't have to report hours, they just have to report that they're an owner-operator on the job.
So that is still the same.
Okay.
I will tell you, and that'll be kind of ending comments too, is we try to put that in regulations so that would be the law instead of an advisory opinion.
Okay.
We were advised by the Legislative Council Bureau that that would require an actual legislative change, but that doesn't change our position at all. We're still having the advisory opinion and still saying if you're an owner-operator, you just have to certify you're an owner-operator, so that has not changed.
Okay.
So let's jump ahead, Jennifer. So this is a big bill, Senate Bill 207, which is the Apprenticeship Utilization Act. So one of the exceptions to paying the prevailing wage rate is if you have a registered apprentice. And I'm going to emphasize the point, registered apprentice, which means they have to be registered with the Nevada State Apprenticeship Council. It can't just be somebody you call an apprentice. It can't be a trainee. It has to be an actual apprentice. So that is an exception to the prevailing wage. So Senate Bill 207, which will take effect January 1st, 2020, will now require a certain amount of percentage of apprentices on a project. As you can see, it'll be different for vertical construction versus horizontal construction. This bill will be a big bill for everybody in this room. If you cannot meet those percentages as a contractor or a subcontractor, the awarding body that you're pursuing that project with can seek a waiver of these requirements from the labor commissioner. However, to get that waiver, they're going to have to establish good cause. And good cause means every single one of those things that are listed under it. There has to be no apprentices within the jurisdiction, their work is uniquely complex or hazardous, or the contractor has requested apprentices from an apprenticeship program, it's been denied, or it hasn't been approved within 5 days. Now, I'm going to say the obvious, and it's public knowledge. This is going to hurt the non-union contractor because a lot of non-union contractors, A, either don't have apprentices or don't have access to apprentices, or maybe just don't want to ask for apprentices from the union halls or the trade organizations and different things like that. So again, whether you like this bill or don't like this bill, it will become the law January 1st, 2020. From the awarding body side, you are now going to have to make sure that those percentages are met. You're going to not be able to close out your project until you know those percentages have been met. Now, obviously, there is some concern about this bill and how it's going to be implemented and how are we going to do this. I'm trying to tell everybody, again, stay calm. We're soliciting comments right now on Senate Bill 207 and some possible regulations, and we're going to do the best that we can to try and implement it. We're working on a form for the waiver where it will be submitted electronically, where the awarding body will have the ability to upload documents and upload the waiver request. Obviously, from the labor commissioner side, our goal will be to turn those around as quickly as possible. What I have told all the other groups this week is, as the labor commissioner, my guess is that the first day that this bill becomes effective, I'm going to probably get like 10 calls and say, well, can't we get an exemption? Can't we, can't you do this for this project? Can't you do this for this project? I will tell you, I don't want to do that. I know it's coming, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to pick and choose. An exemption will be granted on this one, it won't be granted on this one. I don't know how this is going to look. So again, I don't want people to panic, but you definitely need to be aware of this bill. And you certainly need to be aware that it applies to all projects now, all public works projects. There were no exemptions carved out. And quite honestly, even if we tried to carve some out now through regulation, I'm not sure that we can do that because the law is pretty black and white. Again, whether you like it or don't like it, this is going to be the reality. Now, the other reality is, obviously, each waiver request that comes before the labor commissioner, a decision is going to be made. That decision, some people might like, some people might not like it, which could result in potential litigation. So this could result in a legal challenge or a court challenge, but until that happens, this is technically the law. You know, again, the testimony during the session was on all sides. Some people really like this bill and like the intent of this bill. Other people think it's going to have unintended consequences, and unfortunately, the unintended consequences are probably more geared towards the non-union contractor, and that's just a reality.
I like 3 questions, sorry. So what if you have like let's say you're like a 3rd tier sub on a project that's prevailing wage, and let's say you have like a 3-man crew. Are you going to be required to try and get an apprentice, even with like that small crew, to do like a couple weeks worth of work?
What I would tell you, and this is what we're telling folks, is you need to work with your general. And, you know, there's some of the terms in this bill, it talks about the hours of the project.
I would say, so is it for the whole inclusive project, or is it broken down by each like contract?
Well,
when it comes to reported?
it talks about each apprenticeable craft. So this is the area where we're going to have to take some of these on a case by case. And I'm not trying to avoid the question, but honestly, I don't know how some of this even looks. And, you know, we're trying to give like the big picture here of like we're interpreting it as the total hours.
Okay.
But I would say, you know, work with your general and then obviously work with your awarding body, and you're going to have to identify, you know, it's a plumbing project or it's an electrical project. This is how many workers that'll be on the project. Based on that number, this is how many apprentices will be needed. You know, you're going to have to do all that up front.
Right.
But again, some of this is going to be case by case, and I hate to say that, but it is going to be the reality.
Right, I understand, it's new for everybody, but then my other question then to follow up that one is, if I'm a 2nd tier sub and I have a 3rd tier sub, you know what I mean, are they gonna be required to have apprentices? Like, if I have apprentices that are meeting whatever the percentages for that project, you know, are they gonna also have to have them? Like, another question is, the unions only have so many apprentices. Like, seriously, for this area, there is not enough for all us general contractors to have the percentage that's required on the job. So then what do we run into there? Like,
What I would say is this.
I mean, literally, like, there might be 30 apprentices in the operators, period. And there's,
For the whole entire region.
exactly, for the whole region. So, I mean, I and like Q&D, my company in Q&D, have a pretty good percentage, but I know that Granite has way less than we do, and they have more employees. So, you know what I mean? Like, there's only so many apprentices, so then what do? Then do we file for a waiver because there's none available? Like,
Well, again, it's going to be case by case. What you're outlining, I already know is coming to my office. So a decision is going to have to be made. And, you know, a decision is going to have to be made by the labor commissioner that says, look, here's the facts, there are no apprentices, here's why a waiver should be granted. Now, the risk to that is there might be some other people that say, well, it doesn't meet the exact requirements.
right, it doesn't meet a
So,
good cause.
so again, the labor commissioner is going to have to make a decision, and that decision, again, will either stand or someone will challenge it. But what you're outlining, I already know is coming.
I know,
You
I'm
know,
sure you guys have done the research and stuff too, but I'm just saying as a general contractor, you know, we already have X amount of apprentices, and then I also know that in this new bill, it does explain that, let's say, like I just had a guy journeyman out as an apprentice, but I can use him still on whatever prevailing wage project I have as an apprentice or a journeyman. But my collective bargaining agreement says I have to pay him journeyman wage, but I can still claim him as an apprentice.
Right.
So I
Well,
see that will help, but like I said, if there's only 30 apprentices and they're all dispatched out, we're kind of left hanging there.
And again, I know the reality you're talking about. This hasn't, it's technically not effective yet.
Right.
So again, we're trying to get the word out. I envision that the situation that you just presented is going to be at my office on January 2nd, 2020. And again, a decision is going to have to be made by the labor commissioner that, hey, you know, this may not be exactly the good cause requirements, but maybe there's another way to grant an exemption. I don't know.
Okay, I have one more, and then I'll be quiet for a few minutes. So then, with the tracking of the apprenticeship hours, it's a percentage by individual, or you said it's by hours, by job? So I have to track that, and how does that get reported? Does that just get turned in by the awarding body to the labor commissioner?
Well, technically, nothing gets turned into the labor commissioner.
Okay.
Now, obviously, how I envision this going is, okay, let's say there's somebody that's doing a project and they're not complying with those percentages, and the awarding body is not monitoring those percentages, and then all of a sudden a complaint gets filed with the labor commissioner.
Okay.
And we go back to awarding body XYZ, and we go back to contractor XYZ and say, you didn't report any apprentices on this project, you didn't have a waiver, please tell us why. And then at that point, there's the potential for administrative fines and disqualifications. But technically, nothing will be turned in, quote unquote, to the labor commissioner. Now,
Okay.
obviously,
Only if
the
there's
tracking will be
issue.
on the certified payroll reports.
Right.
And the awarding body is going to have to be reviewing those certified payroll reports.
Right, and like I know, like for Washoe County, like for the schools, they monitor those pretty deep. I mean, whenever they're due, like by the 15th. So like next week, like the general I'm working for, she'll be at their office going through all the certified payroll reports.
One of the other elements here is obviously the apprenticeship verification.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, the State Apprenticeship Council was moved out of the Labor Commissioner's office in 2017. It's now with the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation. So I have a meeting set up with them within the next month to talk about a better way to possibly handle apprenticeship verification. I certainly understand the complaints and the concerns, and this could become a big issue in terms of this bill, because I've heard situations where, you know, the apprentice has completed the program, they've graduated, but they're technically not showing as registered in the system.
Right.
Even though they are. So again, our office is going to work with, you know, the State Apprenticeship Council and talk about that issue. But, you know, this is one of those bills where we're probably going to have some bumps, and I'm going to say that right up front. We're probably going to have a bumpy path, and again, trying to figure some of this stuff out. But, you know, I know the concerns, and I know there's probably 50 million different scenarios, which is why, again, when those waivers come to our office, we're going to look at them case by case by case. Again, asking people to submit language for potential regulations, and at some point, if it takes like an advisory opinion, or if it takes a court decision or something like that, that might be the way we work through some of these issues. But you know, this is going to become effective January 1st, 2020. And sorry, gentlemen.
I have a broader question, but if you only have union apprenticeship available as a non-union contractor, does it start to conflict with your right to work? Issues with state Nevada Constitution?
So when I said there might be legal challenges,
Broader question.
Obviously, Nevada is a right-to-work state. You can't force somebody to sign a union agreement or join a union. So, again, how this plays out, we could at some point end up in court. But your point certainly is one that I think most people are aware of. Now, again, how that gets addressed, whether through, you know, a waiver being denied or a waiver being granted, or somebody just saying, hey, this violates the law, we will probably get there, but we're certainly aware of that issue. And I saw that first way in the back.
You have to apply for a waiver if you have to apply for the waiver if there's not any apprentices available, or is it just an automatic waiver?
You still have to apply for the waiver.
So you have to apply for a waiver no matter what.
Pretty much.
You're not using the.
I mean, I don't see any way around that. I don't see any way around that. And just so everyone's clear too, the waiver has to come from the public body. It cannot come from the contractor. So you either as a public body have to decide, we're gonna pick a contractor that meets those percentages, or you're gonna have to seek a waiver. The other issue is, the waiver is project by project. It's not gonna be like a blanket waiver. So again, factored into the workload of the public body, when I mentioned this before about the responsibilities and what you need to do up front, this is something you probably need to start thinking about for every single project coming up after January 1st, 2020.
What if an awarding agency isn't collecting this? Does it then fall on us to make sure it gets to you guys? What if we've worked for some that aren't really aware of all that they're responsible for?
So what I would say is some awarding bodies do a very, very good job monitoring their projects, staying up on the law, reviewing certified payroll reports. We've had other awarding bodies that didn't review a single certified payroll report for 6 months. And guess what? Every single one of those certified payroll reports were wrong. And that contractor, this didn't happen up north, but that contractor ultimately started bouncing checks, went bankrupt, fled the country at one point. But he's back. So yes, as a contractor, certainly notify us, and we will try and get with that awarding body and say, you need to be on top of this. For those of you that have been on the receiving end of the awarding bodies out there of an administrative penalty from our office, again, we don't do that because we get to keep the money. We do that because we're trying to send a message that you need to monitor your projects. That's the law. It's not our project as a labor commissioner. It's not our money. Awarding bodies have entire staffs that is their job, to review certified payroll reports, to look at projects, to monitor them. So this falls on them, but as a contractor, if it's an awarding body that is not doing that, you need to let us know as soon as possible, because unfortunately at the end of the day, if a complaint is filed, you're going to be caught up in that process, and unless you have evidence that says, hey, we were doing it right, we notified the awarding body, we wouldn't know that. So you do need to let us know if it's somebody that's not doing or monitoring the project.
Sorry, I lied.
Let me get her.
Yeah.
Has there been any change to, or are they making any kind of change to like the apprentice verifications in the time frame? Because like we would have one apprentice that could, in a 60-day period, be on 7 jobs, 4 NDOTs, 2 RTCs, and an airport. So I have to get 7 different apprentice verifications for the same guy who's worked for us for 4 years, since he was an apprentice 1 and he's an apprentice 4. And the dates are all over the place. And if I should miss by 4 days, I can't get him into LCP tracker, I can't get him approved, he's not on certified payroll, even though we paid him, he was there, but he's blocked. So I have to pull him and then try to figure out, and then like we had a situation where that's what I did, and then there were people on site doing interviews, and I get the call from MedDOT, hey, this guy was on site, but he's not on certified payroll. Well, it's because, I didn't have the verification in on time,
Yeah,
because it's all over the place.
And as I was saying earlier, unfortunately, that's no longer in my control. That is now with, Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation. I have a meeting set up with them to discuss this bigger issue in terms of this bill.
Because it's already kind of an issue with us, but that, for people that are not used to doing it, it's going to be huge. And all the primes are going to be chasing apprentice verifications all over the place, and then it's going to fall back on like NDOT and RTC and all them. And I think it's just going to turn into a huge ordeal.
No, and I understand your concerns, and that's why I have a meeting set up the first week in August, because even though that verification is not under the control of the labor commissioner anymore, I know what an issue it is, and I know what a potential problem it could be for this bill. So if we could work together to come up with something, and again, one of the problems with our office is we just have limited resources and funding. I've always envisioned something where, kind of like checking a license, like a contract, where you would type in a name or something and it would generate, yes, this is a registered apprenticeship, or registered apprentice, this verification is valid for a year, or that's how I envision it. Again, I can't control that now.
And non-job specific.
Right. I'm going to try and do my best to persuade another state organization to move that direction, but your points are well taken. Again, whether people agreed with the move of the apprenticeship council, this is where it does tie directly to the labor commissioner and unfortunately could create some issues for this bill. So
I think I can answer her question too. If you just send one of those apprentice verification sheets and just don't put the project number on it, because I do that because we have like 6 different prevailing wage projects, and then that way you can use that apprenticeship, that date for all of your projects.
So I was told by Donna Bucket that we can't do that, it has to happen.
They never told me, and I get them every
They
single
refused to sign on.
Sorry, but that's how I work around it, because then I don't have to get one for every single job every 60 days. And I just thought that might help you out there.
again, I'm going to have a conversation with that organization, but technically that's outside of my control, but I'm going to do my best. So I saw somebody way back there.
Can you confirm when you said all, this is subject to all public works projects, that is the intent is all public work projects subject to prevailing wage?
If it's over 100,000, I don't see any exception to this.
Right, but you said all public works, so that means all public works jobs would be 50,000, so it's only prevailing wage jobs.
I think you bring up a good question. Honestly, I mean, the way we're interpreting it is it has to be over 100. I'm telling you right now, there's probably people that interpret it that it applies to all. Because it doesn't really say one way or the other. We're interpreting it has to be over 100,000. But it wouldn't surprise me if we got some type of a situation where somebody argues that it's all public works projects.
Who would have that final determination?
Well, again, the labor commissioner would make a decision. As we go through this regulatory process too, maybe there's room for clarifying language that flat out says it only applies to projects over 100.
So,
But the law doesn't say that right now.
so if you interpret it one way and an agency interprets it another way, who's would prevail?
Well, ultimately, I mean, the decision of the labor commissioner would be the final decision, but again, people would have the right to appeal that. You know, the other thing for the awarding bodies is I wouldn't advise like picking and choosing that, well, it applies to this project, it doesn't apply to this project. I mean, I think the 100,000 is the safest line you can draw. But again, you know, these are some of the gray areas that we're going to have to work through. And the other problem I'll tell you, and this kind of ties into all the bills that we've talked about today, is these are bills that pass the legislature. So the language that you're seeing now is language from the bill. This language has to be codified into the Nevada revised statutes. That sometimes can take up to 6 months to a year. So when we say this is the law, January 1st, 2020, everybody's going to go and look at NRS and say, where does this say this in the NRS? It may not say it because it hasn't been codified yet, so you're going to have to go to the actual bill. There is court decisions on this issue where, as an enforcement agency, where you'll take an enforcement action based on, say, Senate Bill 207 or Senate Bill 190, and someone will say, well, it's not in the statute. Well, it may not be in the statute, but once it was signed by the governor and became effective, it's technically law. So I just throw that out there that you're going to probably be looking for all of this stuff in the Nevada revised statutes. It's not going to be there. And it may not be there for a year, and that, again, creates confusion. But you have links to all of these bills. You have links to our website. If all else fails, just go to the bill and pull the language from the bill.
I have a question. On clarification for the vertical and the horizontal construction. So, I mean, obviously vertical versus horizontal is pretty clear cut, but what if you're working like on a school project and you're just doing the excavation, like is that like just the dirt work, is that considered horizontal, or is because the whole project is a school building, it's considered a vertical because it's going from the ground. I just want to get like, do I need 10% apprentices or do I need 3? Like,
So I think I just submitted my resignation. I'm kidding.
I'm just very
No, I'm kidding.
certified payroll and prevailing wage all the time.
Yeah.
So,
What I'm gonna say is that, again, I don't see any exceptions, I don't see any definitions. However, as we go through the regulatory process, and I can tell you, you can't get a regulation package done in 6 months, it's usually a year. But we've sent out a notice, we're asking for written comments, we're asking for guidance, we're asking for these different things. And hopefully we can kind of flesh these issues out as they go. But as you can see, they didn't define some of these things.
yeah,
They
I
didn't-
mean, if I'm building if I'm actually got my workers in there putting steel up, obviously it's horizontal. But if I'm just doing the utilities and the dirt work, I'm like, I'm kind of thinking horizontal, not vertical.
No, but it doesn't say project, it says contractor, subcontractor.
Right.
So it isn't setting it for a project. If you're a horizontal, if Q and D had people doing dirt and building steel on the same thing, the two different things would apply.
Yeah.
According to
Yeah,
that.
yeah, there's, like I said, there's no out. Sorry.
So in conversations with labor during the session, they intended for any horizontal being done on a vertical project to be considered vertical. And I also intended, whether or not it says that was, and I don't know if that can be hashed out in regulation, they also intended it for it to be the 100,000, but that was just conversations with the sponsor and with labor during the session. I know it doesn't help at this point, but it was their intent that that work on a vertical project be considered vertical, and that it apply only to the 100,000 now.
And that's the path we're going down. Again, we'll go through the regulatory process. In the interim, it might require advisory opinions, it might require, even just kind of like general guidance, but this is one of those where I can't plan out every single scenario, unfortunately now. And the first step we take doing that, saying, well, it wouldn't apply in that situation, it's going to be the opposite. And again, I don't want to, and unfortunately previous labor commissioners got in that habit where depending upon the contractor, depending upon the awarding body, you got a different decision on any given day. I don't want to do that, which is why, again, making everybody aware that this is coming January 1st, 2020, know the concerns, know the issues, going to try and work through them, again, case by case. If it's something where we're seeing a pattern where, hey, all these projects have this in common, or it should be vertical, it should be, we're going to try and identify those issues, but like I said, this is the language of the bill, and we're just going to have to work through it as best we can, but certainly wanted to make sure that all of you are aware of this bill, because this is, quite frankly, given the rest of them, this one is probably the one that's probably going to have the most impact, good or bad. And, again, on all sides, and to the gentleman's point back there, this is a right to work state, and this is potentially blurring some of those lines in terms of union versus non-union contractors. But again, we'll work through it as best we can. I anticipate too, probably sometime in November or December, once we have the waiver form up and running in test capacity, that we'll come out and do another training that will only be on Senate Bill 207, not on all the other stuff, because that's one that, again, I don't want projects to be delayed, don't want it to basically stop work out there, but, again, want to work through the issues as best we can, and try and implement the provisions of the bill. It is the law. So again, we can't turn back time right now. So I'm going to have Mr. Gould take over if you don't mind.
Sweet. You guys hear me okay? A little dyslexic. So Design professionals are also excluded from your prevailing wage rates. Shannon touched on service providers. The question, as she brought up, service provider may or may not include the person that's delivering the concrete. So a case-by-case basis, if I have somebody delivering concrete, and he's on site for a half an hour, he goes back, he grabs his back, and he comes back, and he's on site for a half an hour.
Sorry.
So basically, he's there for a half a day. We're probably going to consider him as not a service provider. And those are the types of claims that we start seeing.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I pushed a button.
But is there like a minimum, like if he's only there for 45 minutes, less than an hour, let's say, I don't consider it,
We would probably side with that.
okay, yeah.
Yeah. But the typical scenario is we are seeing these guys come in and then come back and come back and come back.
Right.
So the time that they're on site, absolutely. That also goes for a concrete delivery person who's picking up the batch from a batch plant that's specific to that job. And that whole time is going to be considered prevailing wage.
One of the issues, and I can speak loud enough, is so truck drivers by law, if they're transporting between two public work sites, they're subject to prevailing wage. What we are seeing lately is somebody will say, and it's happening in Vegas, but if you designate like a batch plant, or as Dave was saying, a pit, or you designate something specifically to perform work for that project, that is subject to prevailing wage. What we have seen lately is, it's very interesting, is we've seen companies, basically they will all of a sudden designate their parking lot as like a fabrication plant, or like a place where they put stuff together, and will say that that's not subject to prevailing wage because it's their parking lot. Well, you kind of can't have both ways. I mean, if you're designating your parking lot specifically for that project and to put the materials together or the whatever together for that project, it's going to be prevailing wage. But that's how we've seen some contractors try to get around that. That just doesn't make any sense.
Well, how does that, because the way the law is written is when you're on that project, and if you're a fabrication shop and you're fabricating for multiple projects, and you're fabricating for that project in your shop, and you're fabricating for other projects, to me, the way I've always been trained for Dave's Bacon and for state prevailing wage, that is not prevailing wage.
And you're correct,
Yeah.
because you're a fabrication shop.
You
You didn't just all of a sudden designate your parking lot as your fabrication shop.
So as long as we actually are fabricating other things in our facility, even though maybe for a whole week just that one project, we are okay not prevailing.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay.
And even if it's
It got me scared there.
If it's your facility and you're fabricating for that project, you're not subject to prevailing wage until you go onto that project.
So what about the concrete driver then? The concrete guy is going, cement, he's going back to his plant that is being used for other projects, not just that one project. So he is not subject to the prevailing wage from the project back to the
Correct, travel time.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Just, I got it.
15th of the month, of the following month, they should capture the payroll all the way through the month. Some people think it's at the end of their pay period or whatever that looks like, but it's through the end of the month. SB 231 gave us some more things to deal with as far as creating a process for doing electronic submissions. Right now, the way the law is we don't care how you get the certified payroll reports in, as long as you get them in on time. Some people require LCP tracker, some people absolutely refuse to use LCP tracker. We don't have access to LCP tracker. We're hoping that'll change at some point, but it's an expensive endeavor, and we are the redheaded stepchild of the state.
So on Monday, when we were doing the training on this topic, I said that I thought LCP tracker was a racket, and that they had a market on this industry, and that if we were smart, that we would develop our own electronic reporting system. And little did I know, but somebody from LCP Tracker was sitting in the but we actually had a good conversation. Again, we don't, and they have approached me, they wanted me as the labor commissioner to say, you have to use LCP Tracker. Obviously, we're not going to do that, but that whole issue of electronic reporting, we are going to try and come up with some consistency on how things are reported and different things like that. But again, we don't require you to use LCP Tracker. It's just one of those products that it got hold in Nevada, and it seems like everybody's using it. But again, we don't even have access to it. So just so you know.
So these are the criteria for who's, all the things that are supposed to be listed on there, the name of the worker, the classification. Classification is very, very important. This is what we're running across on the claims that we get most common is people are misclassified. So they'll classify their electrician as a laborer for 2 hours, 3 hours a day because they're moving pipe or they're cleaning up or whatever the case might be. We did an advisory opinion specific to that issue. If that person is a journeyman electrician on that project, they're a journeyman electrician on that project. The other issue we see is the person that's classified as a laborer when they're actually using skid steers, bobcats, and that sort of thing, so they should be classified as an operator, assuming that they're operating that equipment for several hours a day. If it's happenstance, they go over there to use it to move tools or something like that, that's not what we're looking at. But there's a great deal of misclassification that we see. And if we see that, generally the contractor has to go back, pay all the difference in the prevailing wage rate, which is typically $20, $30 an hour, and then the penalties, possible disqualifications. So make sure your people are being classified correctly. For the general contractors out there, I can't tell you enough, if you're not maintaining supervision over that site and your subcontractor, I get claims and they say, hey, I worked on that site for 12 hours a day, I only got paid for 8 hours a day, they banked some of this and banked some of that, and there was 12 guys on the project, and I go out to the general contractor and I say, do you have a list of everyone that was on that project for the time that they were on the project? Usually the answer is no. And so it's not a fun process for anybody at that point. And we have seen the general contractor on several instances. One this year was on the hook for $450,000 because of their subcontractor's misclassification and basically not paying any prevailing wage rates or turning in CPRs. So pay attention to that.
And one of the comments we're getting from, and it's a bigger issue that maybe we can address next legislative session, again, not under the jurisdiction of the labor commissioner, but the whole provision of the law that you pick the lowest responsive bidder. Sometimes there's a reason why they're the lowest, is because they're flat out lying on the bid. There's no such thing as a laborer/electrician. You're either an electrician or you're a laborer. You're either an operator or you're an electrician. There's no such thing. So when we get these types of claims and horrible cases, we go back and we'll actually look at the bid. And it's so obvious from the start why the whole thing is going to go south from day one, because the bid sometimes is $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 less than every other bid. And the general or the awarding body is saying, well, I have to use this person because it's the lowest. You don't have to. The risk of not doing that is you potentially face a bid protest. But we have had awarding bodies that are like, I am more than willing to face that bid protest because I don't want to use that contractor because I know what they do. I know they misclassify their people. I don't even want to take the risk to do that. Again, that's something on my list for next session. But for the awarding bodies out there, if you're seeing a bid that really looks off compared to the other 2 or 3, you might want to take a second look at it, because we literally, when we pull it, you can see right away, they just flat out underbid on purpose and use the incorrect job classification. So just be aware of that issue, because that tends to lead to a lot of other issues down the road.
Go ahead.
So going back to the classifications, so if you have an employee who's on the same job site and he's doing two different functions, two different classifications, so he's doing 4 hours as a laborer, 4 hours as a carpenter, can you split rate him for that day, or do you just have to pick one of them?
Realistically, you should have that person, especially in these times, being classified as the carpenter. Because what that person's going to do at some point when they no longer work for you is they're going to come to us and say, well, actually, I was doing carpentry almost the whole time, maybe an hour of the other. And you're going to have to prove exactly what he was doing for any given time. So it's we can't tell you how to run your business, but we're going to say if that's what he's there to do, be a carpenter, use him as a carpenter. If you want a laborer to do that stuff, bring in a laborer. Because we know how easy it is to find labor right now, right? So when you're reviewing the CPRs, make sure that you're looking closely at a couple things here. If they're on a 410 schedule, make sure they're adhering to the 410 schedule. Make sure that you may ask your subcontractors, did everybody sign an agreement saying they were going to work these 410s? Because that can be another issue. Look for the hours matching. So if you're an awarding body, you can request payroll records to include time records from that contractor just to see if everything jives. Because usually when we go through the claim process, they don't jive at all. The certified payroll report looks great, says that they worked 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, got paid the right amount, but then we look at their payroll records and it actually looks like they've been paid maybe half of that. So can you rely on a submission? Absolutely. Make sure the work report matches the job. If you have a job that's ironwork and everyone's classified as a laborer, you might have an issue. That's happened with us. And then make sure with all these new regulations that are coming in, you've got your premium pay, you've got your possible double overtime pay or triple overtime pay. All these things are going to be an issue for you. And if anybody wants a copy of this PowerPoint, just let us know. We'll get it out to you. I can make it up.
Oh, there we go.
We've covered the apprenticeship ratio a little bit. The benefits, let's just get into that now because we're kind of running out of time. So AB 190, in addition to all the other things we brought up today, it makes clear what a bona fide fringe benefit is. So the question we get a lot is a 401k plan going to qualify as a fringe benefit? And we say maybe. And the reason we say maybe is because a lot of contractors will only pay into that 401k on a public works project. And in that case, we'll say, no, it's not a fringe benefit. Those benefits should be paid through a third-party administrator. They should be paid throughout the entire year. Private project. So this bill made it very clear that in order to be a bona fide fringe benefit, they have to be annualized, meaning it has to be paid throughout the whole year and basically in equal amounts. So we have a number of contractors out there, seems to be only in the north, as far as I know. They have let's say it's an electrician, the rate's $58 an hour. They have a signed agreement with their employee that says, we're going to pay you $30 an hour and put $28 in the 401k for you. So that is not a bona fide fringe benefit. It's a cluster.
And the whole intent of this, and you know, again, it's one of those issues where you go through the fog and then it becomes clear. To take that off somebody's hourly rate, they truly have to get the benefit of that at some point in time in the future, whether it's through health benefits or retirement, or, you know, the other one and the horror story we've seen is that, oh, it's a vacation fund. Well, it's a vacation fund for the owner to go deer hunting for 4 weeks. But if the employer has an ability to pull that money back at any point in time so that the employee actually will never get it, it doesn't meet that definition. And again, to Dave's point, we are seeing this right now where everything's a fringe. Everything's a fringe. The company truck's a fringe. The gas is a fringe. So we have seen situations where supposedly somebody made $3,200 in a 2-week period and their paycheck shows $540 because everything else is a fringe. No, not now, not according to Assembly Bill 190. And again, we're hoping that this bill will kind of stop some of that, but we're seeing it right now, and it's not pretty for the worker, I can tell you that. And again, those are the types of situations where obviously we'll do an investigation, but that might be administrative fines and that might be disqualification. Because that's absolutely not in compliance with the law.
And the bill really just clarified what our stance has been all along. So it was actually one of the bills that we like to see coming out of the legislature. And for those of you that don't know this, we don't create regulations as far as the legislature is concerned. They create the laws, and we deal with them. That's it. Best we can. For the awarding bodies out there, you should be doing self-audits on a very regular basis, like as soon as the certified payroll reports come out. You should also be on site at least occasionally. I can't tell you how many awarding bodies don't, and they'll say we don't have the personnel to go out there, but it's their project. They own the project, and they should be on site at least periodically. If we get a wage complaint, we will typically either send it out to the awarding body to investigate, or we'll investigate it ourselves. One thing I can tell you is if you get a notice of claim, you respond to it immediately. If you need extra time to respond to it accurately, that's fine, but you need to respond, because if you don't, things get ugly pretty fast.
And on that point, and for the contractors out there and the subcontractors, just because you are now, quote unquote, the subject of a wage claim, we're a neutral body, we do an investigation. It doesn't mean we're automatically going to find one way or the other. I can tell you that we have some people that come into our office that file wage claims that are completely off the wall and are just flat out completely lying. And when we go to the employer, we go to the contractor, you know, John Smith said he did this, or he did this, or he did this. They say, oh, here, we have the daily logs, we have the job reports, we have what the foreman wrote down. He didn't do anywhere even close to what he said he did. But if we don't have that evidence and we don't have that backup, we sometimes have to take the word of, you know, this employee that we're like, well, we don't really believe him, but they also don't have any records to show one way or the other. Where this also comes up is where all of a sudden someone will claim they were a foreman and they'll claim foreman pay. And we go to the contractor or we go to the awarding body and they're like, yeah, we didn't know who the foreman was. You know, I guess he was the foreman or he could have been the foreman. Well, to me, that doesn't make any sense either. So again, know who's out there and document what they're doing.
Go ahead.
Question. Going back to the 410s, if you have a guy who's on a job who has a 410 agreement with one job and then you move into another job in the middle of the week, is he subject to the overtime or anything after 8 hours on?
It's project specific.
Pardon?
It's going to be project specific. So if he's working, he's set for a 410, he works Monday and Tuesday, you pull him off the job, now he's working the other. So it'll be project specific at that point. So until you reach after 40 hours that week, overtime wouldn't apply.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
So let's say he works Monday and Tuesday, 10 hours a day, and then he's off that project, and now Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, he goes to another project.
Right.
So he's gonna end up, assuming he works 8 hours on those 3 other days, with 4 hours of overtime,
Okay.
But it would be based on the first.
based on the 40 hours.
But you would,
It wouldn't revert to the other.
oh, it doesn't revert back.
No, because you pulled him off that project that he agreed to work at,
Yeah.
410s. This project doesn't require 410s.
So the
But
overtime.
if he didn't fulfill his 410s on the first
That's
project,
okay. Because if that project ended for him,
what if it, oh, for example?
No, the project didn't end. Let's say the project didn't end.
But you chose to alter his schedule.
Yes.
Right.
then you're
So,
back to.
yeah, so if you chose to alter his schedule to the detriment of him, then you're probably gonna be
8
subject
hours.
to 8 hours because he worked those 10 hours those first 2 days. So what we say with the 410 is be consistent and don't do stuff like that. Because it can, and you know, unfortunately, Nevada, and every legislative session, we have this conversation of, can't we get rid of that 8-hour rule? Because it creates nothing but confusion and questions like yours. Can't we just go to 40? Unfortunately, we didn't get there this session, hopefully maybe next session, but if you have the 410s, be consistent. And, you know, the other mix that comes into play sometimes is public versus private project. If the overtime kicks in when they're on the public project, it's the prevailing wage rate that applies. So make sure you avoid, best advice is avoid those types of situations.
So on this slide, you can see, remember fiscal is going to be July through June. You can see a definite trend in what is going on in our office. Part of it's from the electronic filing, we think. A lot of it is because of our great economy. I can tell you, fiscal year 2019, considering that $450,000 claim that was paid earlier this year and some of the other ones that I've seen come through, we're probably going to be about $1 million. And we're going to have a great many administrative assessment fees out there because there are a lot of awarding bodies that just simply are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And you should have seen the jaws drop when they found out what their responsibilities were on Monday.
Where did the assessment fees go? Do you remember?
General fund.
General fund.
Yeah.
So
Our general
again,
lunch fund.
again, a possible legislative change next session, which I'm hoping for. So the forfeitures, because there's administrative penalties and then there's forfeitures. So in the example that I talked about where the awarding body didn't monitor their certified payroll reports for 6 months, and every day those employees were paid incorrectly, a forfeiture gets tacked on. The way the law reads now is those forfeitures go back to the awarding body, if that makes any sense. So you essentially get rewarded for not doing your job. I don't like that provision. I have never liked that provision, and hoping maybe next session to change that, but that does not make any sense to me. And we've also seen some awarding bodies, and we've really tempered that down where, you know, and again, get your certified payroll reports in timely, but literally, like, if it was 1 minute late, it was an automatic $1,000 penalty. Then it was $5,000. Then it was, we had some awarding bodies where the forfeitures and the penalties just for like a late certified payroll report were more than the actual project. That again does not make any sense to me. And you shouldn't be rewarded for not fixing a problem. And again, that's my opinion as this labor commissioner, because that to me defeats the whole purpose of what we're trying to do, and especially managing public funds and different things like that. So that's something I'm going to try and get change next session. Whether I have any luck, I don't know, but we don't keep any of them general fund or back to the awarding body.
So what is listed up here, if you need additional guidance, is we will be very responsive. You can call me or email me directly or our main number, and we will respond to whatever questions you have as best we can. There are requests for advisory opinions, which is basically a letter to the commission chambers asking for clarification. We assume we're going to get a fair number of those pretty quick. We've never had to do a petition for declaratory order. We do have these working groups just like this one. We have public comment that we are hoping that people will engage in on some of these issues that we're seeing coming out of the legislature. And then there is on our website the awarding and public body handbook guide. That's just as handy to the contractor as it is anyone else.
And it's been updated as of July 1st, 2019, and has every single new law and every single new requirement. So it's on there. That was one of the things we tried to do and make sure that that was up July 1st, 2019, because we knew that some people may not be aware that a lot of this stuff became effective July 1st, 2019, and there really is no grace period. What's hit is hit. The only one that hasn't hit yet is Senate Bill 207, which will become effective January 1st, 2020. And for those of you, you're always willing to contact me, where I sometimes will say, well, I want you to talk to Dave or Jennifer or my chief investigator, is if it's an active investigation, I tend to not get involved, because if it ends up in a hearing, I may end up being the hearing officer and I have to be impartial. So you can always contact me, but there may be times where I just say, I can't comment on that case, you need to talk to somebody else.
Go ahead.
Is there an application that can support all this new rates that are coming up? I'm currently using QuickBooks Online, and I already use all the different fields. So I don't know if there's someone here that can recommend using a different application that might work better.
So if you have that, if you can get back to her, I'm sure she'd appreciate it. I haven't heard of anything. It simplifies the process.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're talking about like payroll, you know, there's payroll systems out there, but LCP Tracker, and quote me if I'm wrong, LCP Tracker, it's a reporting tool, but it doesn't generate like your payroll and things like that. So, you know, there's a lot of different payroll systems out there. Our office obviously can't recommend one of them, but you know, I would just maybe Google some and see what comes up. But yeah, if anybody has a payroll service they use, maybe just let her know.